morning, everybody. My background has disappeared, but that's okay. Green will work for now. Of course, my name is Sandy Campbell. I am the executive director for just a couple more days of the Santa Fe Council on International Relations. It's been such an incredible journey in this post, in this great experience and experiment of taking CIR forward. I'll miss all of you so much out there, but truly, the tiller is in very fine hands as we go forward. This today is, I think, my 132nd live stream since last March of 2020, which is pretty astonishing. And I'm certainly going to miss all the amazing folks, all the amazing talents and speakers who have joined us over this period of time. It's been an extraordinary journey. So a couple quick updates. Obviously, we are living in a strange time, and the coronavirus seems to have really dug in its heels. As a consequence, we have canceled our in-person gatherings, as many of you know, for the foreseeable future. We are keeping our eyes very closely on the coronavirus situation, as one and all of us truly are, and truly we hope to see some changes and some positive news coming out of this. But until that time, we will be remaining in this crazy, wild, and yet absolutely amazing and direct Zoom universe. Our next talk is on August 26th. That's a Thursday, and it is our usual luncheon, and please bring your lunch to the stream, but it's featuring or talking all about the state of the State Department. And we have some excellent speakers lined up. We have Ambassador Vicki Huddleston, of course. We have Ambassador Marco Squino. We have Ambassador David Killian, who is a new member of our program committee and has been in Santa Fe for a couple of years now, was the U.S. ambassador to UNESCO and is a super, super interesting individual. And this will all be moderated by Rebecca Black, who was formerly with USAID and has all kinds of things to say from that perspective. It's going to be a good one. That's Thursday, August 26th. Please join us. And lastly, we will have most certainly lots of programs coming up as we look at, all the things happening in this world of ours, and getting a better understanding of the things that are happening in this world. So lots of live streams will be coming up your way in the next little while. And I think on that point, I am going to stop talking now. I'll try to fix my background, and I'm going to bring in the interim executive director for the Santa Fe Council on International Relations, Jim Falk. And Jim is the retired CEO and president of the Dallas-Fort Worth World Affairs Council. And he is going to be holding the tiller steady while a nationwide search is underway for my replacement. So good morning to Jim. How are you?
Good morning, Sandy. And who would have thought that we would know about how to use green screens or even what a green screen was about 18 months ago? Thanks for giving me the opportunity to say hello to everyone. Sandy, fortunately, as I hold on to this tiller, the seas are calm thanks to your wonderful leadership over 5 years. On behalf of the board, and if I may speak for our members, job well done. You're going to be a hard act to follow. Let me remind everyone that we are looking for a new executive director. Interim is before my title, and hope to do this just for a few months and help with the transition along with Sandy to the new executive director. We're taking applications for the next several weeks, in fact, through September 10th. You can find an application or rather a job announcement on our website and elsewhere. And just go ahead and send that to Susan at sfcir.org. If you'd like to talk with me about anything, just write me at jim@sfcir.org. And in fact, Sandy, you mentioned programs. In fact, today at I think 12:30, Mark Asquino, our incoming president and head of the program committee, we have a meeting, and we'll be coming up with lots of programs. One thing I wanted to add, and then I'll turn it back to you, Sandy, is for the digest. Sandy told me that often he gets suggestions for the important reads from you. So please do send me your suggestions about programs and articles and opinion pieces that our members and audience would enjoy. And with that, Sandy, I turn it back to you for not your last program, because you can be sure that I'll be calling on you to be a guest moderator, and no doubt our successor will too. I'm looking forward to the program. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. Super stuff. And Jim's just such a great individual, and I have no doubt that lots of interesting, fun things are coming our way. So, on that note, let me encourage our panelists to click on their videos and can come in and join the fun. And I will quickly introduce each of you in turn. First up, I want to introduce the president and CEO of the National Peace Corps Association, who is himself an RPCV from Guatemala in 1988 to 91, Glenn Blumhorst. Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you, Sandy. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to be part of your program.
Thank you for being here. Next up is a face many of you, I'm sure, know from around New Mexico, is Greg Polk, who is a member of the coordinating committee of the New Mexico Peace Corps Association, and of course, an RPCV from Mali, 1973 to 75. Good morning, Greg. Always great to see you.
Thank you, Sandy. Glad to be here.
And lastly, let me introduce Diego Romero. And Diego, some of you may well have seen at our various events. He is an invitee for the Peace Corps in Morocco. He is a UNM graduate, and he was CIR's 2019 College Intern of the Year. Diego, good morning. How are you?
Morning, Sandy. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. So Diego, I thought we would start today's conversation with you, because you in many ways are in fact the future of the Peace Corps. Tell us a little bit about your story, Diego. I know there's a few chapters to it already, and you haven't even got your boots on the ground in another country. So tell us a little bit about sort of what you have been going through, and of course, what you hope to have come soon.
Definitely. Well, again, thank you so much, Sandy, for allowing me to speak with you all today about it, and for being able to share my kind of unique story when it comes to the Peace Corps. Just like you had said earlier, I was a part of, CIR's college intern back in 2019, and I want to thank you and CIR for all of your guidance to, leading me towards the direction of the Peace Corps. And Ambassador Esquino and Huddleston also spoke with me about doing it, and just was really convincing and just wanting to serve with the Peace Corps. And again, I graduated from the University of New Mexico in the spring of 2020, which I'm sure we all know is probably the best semester to graduate with your bachelor's in, right as the pandemic hits. And I was invited to join Peace Corps in Morocco with the youth and development sector, given the green light and given a September 2020 departure date. And then we all know COVID hit. And so with everything kind of being thrown up in the air, I have been delayed about 5 separate occasions now in terms of my departure date. And where it stands now, I am delayed until 2022, excuse me. And that could mean January, that could mean December. And now with the whole Delta variant, who knows, it could be delayed even further on. So right now, or it stands with me, I am in a kind of sense of limbo when it comes to it all, but still holding out for it, because that is, I know for sure this is what I want to do, is kind of the next step in wanting to serve in Morocco. So that's kind of where I stand now, in a bit of a unique situation, and hearing tons of rumors and thoughts about what it could all look like in a post-pandemic world, and what the Peace Corps could be in a post-pandemic world. So that's
you've been given assurances by the Peace Corps that this indeed will come to pass, or I guess it's too difficult for them to even forecast at this point?
So what I appreciate so much about the Peace Corps is that they have given us all options in terms of if we want to withdraw our application and our invitee status, if we want to hold out for it, or even if we would like to serve in a different country should it open up before our country. So that is an option that I have decided to take. I have noted in my application with the pandemic that should another country open up soon within my sector, I would also like to go there if I can't hold out for Morocco. So they have taken care of us in that respect, which I really, really appreciate. But again, it's just a matter of personal choice now in terms of the application and the invitee status.
And last little question for you. I know we talked about before the possibility that that future Peace Corps folks would be used in a coronavirus response, administering vaccines or education. Do you have any insight on that?
If I'm being 100% honest, no, not too much insight. From what I've heard from other people who are supposed to be in my cohort, and from other people who have connections, that these are just kind of the ideas or thoughts that have been floating around in terms of, youth and development, that people we'd be trained to help administer COVID vaccines, and again with education in terms of COVID response, such as wearing masks, social distancing. But again, I imagine it would be a hard thing to be a Peace Corps volunteer while having to adhere to those sorts of guidelines. So we'll see. I'm again not too sure.
Oh, thanks for your patience, Diego. And certainly I hope this can be resolved sooner than later. And it's just this further underlining that this is not an American pandemic. We are in a global pandemic, and we in this country will not be able to move forward until the entire world moves forward. So best of luck. We'll come back to you in a minute. And Glenn, I wanted to kick the conversation over to you for a second, because you obviously occupy a unique niche in our understanding of the future of the Peace Corps. So why don't we start at the big top level question here, which is, from your seat, what is the future of the Peace Corps? What's the immediate plan? Are any countries already approved? Is there a budget? And what about these coronavirus questions? So let's dive into those from your seat, Glenn.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sandy. And I just want to extend thanks also to the Santa Fe Council on International Relations for hosting this event and making it free to everyone to attend. It's a really great topic to be talking about, and very grateful for this forum. Thanks also to Greg Polk and the New Mexico Peace Corps Association for organizing and collaborating with you on this really great event. And I'm very honored and privileged to be a part of it here from my home base in Washington, D.C., Maryland. Diego, I just want to say thanks also to you for your desire to serve our country in the Peace Corps, and for your patience and persistence, and you're exactly the epitome of the ideal Peace Corps volunteer, because you're not going to give up. You're going to continue on this quest to serve in the Peace Corps. And really, that commitment, that sense of commitment, that sense of determination, and really, having that opportunity is going to serve you well. So hang in there, and your time will come, and it's going to be, as it has been for many of us, a life transforming experience. So I just would like to, from my seat, as you say, how do we see things at the Peace Corps? My seat is at the National Peace Corps Association, which is essentially the alumni network of returned Peace Corps volunteers and former staff. We're a private organization, private nonprofit. We are separate from the federal agency of the Peace Corps, which, as you know, is the agency that deploys volunteers, recruits and deploys volunteers overseas on their 2-year assignments. In my case, I served 3 years and a little bit more. And then after Peace Corps becomes a lifetime of commitment to the ideals and the values of the Peace Corps as we continue our service. And that's where our National Peace Corps Association comes in, is to champion that lifelong commitment to Peace Corps ideals and continued service throughout our lifetime. And one of the priorities that we have as part of our strategic goals is about the Peace Corps itself. The future of the Peace Corps right now, of course, being our concern. As we know, last year with the evacuation, at that point, 7,000 volunteers were brought home from around 62 countries, I believe. And since then, no volunteers have been in the field. But since 1961, 240,000 or more volunteers have served in the Peace Corps in 140 countries. So we're in a bit of we call it a temporary hiatus. We are in a situation in which Peace Corps is vulnerable with no volunteers in the field, and really no solid dates in terms of when volunteers can begin to return. Of course, what predicates that is the COVID situation. And while Peace Corps has developed and established layers of conditions and criteria that need to be met for volunteers to return, that's going to happen slowly. So we are seeing some indications, some signals from Peace Corps that some countries are beginning to meet those criteria. For example, Belize has been announced as a country that potentially could be seeing volunteers return by the end of the year. Other countries that are also hopefully soon to see the conditions met, and that includes in large part the COVID situation in those countries. Volunteers, of course, will be vaccinated prior to their service, and will be subject to a whole new protocol of safety and security for their own health. over the longer term, we're hoping to see volunteers return in bigger numbers by next year. This is not going to happen all at once, but it will be a gradual return of volunteers, probably on a country by country basis, and including even some new countries. We have the view of Vietnam becoming a country that would open a new program as part of the return of Peace Corps volunteers to the field. And so we're supporting, as part of our priority, Peace Corps' future. We have provided to Peace Corps leadership and to Congress our recommendations for how Peace Corps should retool and reprogram for the future in this changed world that we live in. And to Diego's comments there in your earlier question, I would say we would expect volunteers to be on the front lines in response to the pandemic, the coronavirus. And we've seen this over the years in terms of volunteers working on HIV/AIDS, on food security, on Ebola relief and malaria. Throughout the history of the Peace Corps, volunteers have been really in the trenches on many of these issues, and it would be expected that in many ways they'll be contributing to the pandemic response as they start redeploying overseas. So happy to share, we have some legislation in place too that's going to hopefully set the stage for not just the return of the volunteers when conditions allow, but reforms and improvements that we would like to see made that come from our community that they have identified. These relate to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Peace Corps, the reprogramming of programs that volunteers are going to be serving in. And it also provides for funding recommendations for the Peace Corps as it returns to service and over the next 5 years, ideally can bring the level of funding up to around $600 million, which we believe would be sufficient to implement many of the reforms and improvements that need to be made, and the costs associated with them in this new environment that we operate in, as well bring the numbers of volunteers up to 10,000, which is a number that's not been reached since the late 1960s. So this is emerging out of Congressman Garamendi's office, and we do have a Senate bill emerging as well from the Menendez office, Senator Menendez's office. Happy to dive a little bit deeper into those later, but just wanted to say we are setting the stage for the future of the Peace Corps. We have a blueprint for the future in this historic legislation. And really we have, as you know, people like Diego who are eager to get out there and serve our country in the Peace Corps. So we're working on your behalf, Diego, and all other RPCVs.
Glenn, let me ask you just a quick follow-up. I know, as we are an implementing partner for State Department's International Visitor Leadership Program, I know that 4 countries have been approved. You talked about Belize. I believe Nigeria is one. Israel is one. I think there's another one is in Europe. Is it possible or a plan to send PCs to these approved countries, or that's on hold for now? Or, given that those have been approved, does that provide an entry point for starting the program sooner than later?
Well, I think the situation, as we would understand, is fluid. The Delta variant is throwing a curveball, I think, at plans, but at the same time, as conditions are met in countries, those will come online, and the recruitment for them with definitive dates will start. You named a few countries that I have not confirmed myself that actually would be inviting volunteers. Again, in Diego's case, we hear that he's potentially being reinvited back next year, and again, I just have to stress that that's contingent upon conditions being met, which as of now have not yet been met in Morocco, for example.
Thank you. Well, Greg, let's turn the conversation over to you for a second. I know you have been involved very, very much in the RPCV community in New Mexico. Tell us a little bit about the third goal of the Peace Corps, and then I'm going to get you to answer a question that's come up in our Q&A of, how do RPCVs, contribute to the mission of the Peace Corps now? And then a question here, at 86 years in good health, says Dudley Hafner, how do I serve in the Peace Corps? So that's a bunch of questions, but give us an overview, Greg, of RPCVs in New Mexico. Oh, you're on mute.
I'm glad you asked that question, Sandy. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be a part of this panel and part of this discussion about the future of Peace Corps. As you may be aware, the Peace Corps established 3 goals when its original authorizing legislation. The first was to provide technical assistance. The second was for Peace Corps volunteers to serve as kind of citizen diplomats to the world. And the third was to bring the world home. And in the narrow sense of that, that's Peace Corps volunteers, after having served in their country, kind of represent what that country is about to their community back in the US. But over time, that definition of the third goal has expanded to include bringing home the spirit of Peace Corps, the spirit of volunteerism, the spirit of community development, community engagement. And in that regard, as Glenn pointed out, there are 240,000 RPCVs, and the future of Peace Corps is as much about that third goal as it is the two other goals. There are 100, what Glenn didn't mention is there are also 185 affiliate groups of the National Peace Corps Association. And these groups are all formed by returned Peace Corps volunteers. And they do everything from raise money for Peace Corps volunteer, current Peace Corps volunteer projects, to host cultural events. But also many of the affiliate groups are advocates for various programmatic aspects of Peace Corps: environmental issues, community development issues, LGBTQ issues. So there's a very active platform for returned Peace Corps volunteers to be involved in the discussion about the future of Peace Corps and support the Peace Corps mission. The New Mexico Peace Corps Association was established in 1992 and now has over 1,000 members. And just quickly to give you a sense of how we've carried out the third goal, the first is community service. We've done everything from tree plantings to river cleanups to repair and fix up activity for nonprofit service organizations. An interesting story, Peace Corps volunteers were part of the leadership group that established the Santa Fe International Folk Art Market. So we've been involved in lots of those kind of community service activities. Another aspect is our small grants program. 3 years ago, we established this program to support RPCV-led projects throughout the state. And that includes everything from a oral history project in the Laguna Pueblo, community gardens in Santa Fe, a dance project in the south part of Albuquerque, a variety of programs, community improvement programs, a refugee wellness program, all led by our PCVs. In 2020, we shifted the focus of our small grant program, We shifted the focus of our small grant program to COVID relief efforts, including mask making, homeless meals for homeless who were affected by COVID, battered assistance to battered women in the troubled situation that was precipitated by COVID. So we really focused on that COVID relief effort, and we intend to continue that program over time. It's funded by a combination of dues and calendar sales and individual fundraising. We've also assisted with evacuated volunteers. There are not many of them in New Mexico because of the small population, but to the extent that there are, we've reached out to them. We've provided job network, job opportunity ideas, moral support, even in one case, financial support. So we definitely are aware of the evacuated community out there and doing what we can with that. We've worked closely with the Peace Corps recruiter, providing speakers to events that the Peace Corps recruiter organizes to promote the idea of Peace Corps and to answer any questions. We create a relationship between any interested volunteer, like in the case of Diego going to Morocco, we would connect him with the RPCVs that had previously served in Morocco, so he could get the benefit of the experiences of all those volunteers who've been working in Morocco over the decades. And lastly, as it relates really directly to the future of Peace Corps itself, an advocacy role. Every year we're involved in contacting our legislators to encourage them to support the Peace Corps budget and the Peace Corps program. We do everything we can to raise awareness of Peace Corps and the importance of Peace Corps service, not only in the form of PCVs, current PCVs, but the role of returned Peace Corps volunteers in the community. And we participated in many of the NPCA activities, including last year, a focus group that the National Peace Corps Association organized to engage returned Peace Corps volunteers in rethinking the priorities of Peace Corps. So with that, I think I'll stop there and open it up for questions.
Thank you, Greg. So question or an issue that you raised, and I'm going to throw this to Glenn, is around evacuated Peace Corps volunteers. You mentioned very few in New Mexico, but of course we here at CIR know well one of those individuals, a fantastic young man named Brent, who worked at our organization for many years. And he was, had just gotten all his training on the ground sorted and set in Myanmar, and then was evacuated, I think, on his first day of being an actual Peace Corps volunteer. Glenn, this, knowing Diego's story, knowing how hard people work to become, a Peace Corps volunteer, and how badly their hearts must have been broken by needing to fly home. What is the plan for those who were evacuated? Are they still in the system? Are they going to be replaced? How has that set of complex issues, how is it being approached?
Certainly. Well, first, just to emphasize that this is the first time in Peace Corps history where there has been a worldwide evacuation. There have been a number of country-specific evacuations or regional evacuations, and generally in those situations, volunteers may be given an opportunity to transfer to another country if they're not able to return to their country of service. In this case, with a worldwide evacuation, there are no options for other countries. That is, I think, the quandary that many of these individuals are in. And as you stated, particularly somebody who has just finished their training and sworn in and started their service, or someone who's halfway through their service, or really at the culmination of their service with a month or two to go. It's heartbreaking and it's traumatic for the volunteers themselves. And part of our work and the groups out there, like the New Mexico Return Peace Corps Volunteer Association, our role there is to connect with them as a community and support them and embrace them and welcome them and provide them even support for their next step in life and career and jobs and so forth. So we were really busy last year extending that support to 7,000 volunteers, and many of them continue in kind of just a standby situation. I've met many of them myself, and they're hoping to return either back to their country of service or some country of service. I've met last week just with somebody in Minnesota who really was intent upon returning to his community where he had been working with a cooperative. But what I'll say is that Peace Corps also has started doing some remote assignments with different countries of service with evacuated Peace Corps volunteers to keep them engaged in their communities. Others have on their own, returned Peace Corps volunteers have continued to be engaged with their communities, just like many of us are after our service. This individual in Minnesota told me that he had helped his cooperative after the evacuation, and they have continued to grow from 20 members at the time he left now to over 200 members, providing some business training and outreach to them. And this is really what RPCVs are about. It's lifelong service, to our counterparts. So with Peace Corps, it's just going to be uncertain in many ways when volunteers can go back. Many, I would have to say, of the evacuated volunteers probably have moved on to other jobs and other academic interests. But at the same time, we have advocated to Peace Corps as well as to Congress to ensure that those individuals who want to continue their service or return to service, that opportunity is expedited to them and that they have that opportunity. And this is included in the legislation that I mentioned that's emerging as part of the reauthorization, the Peace Corps Reauthorization Act. So we're working on their behalf to make sure they have that opportunity.
Sandy, I just realized I didn't answer the last question that you asked of me. What was that question?
Let's hold on to that for a second because I want to just go to Diego. And Diego, do you want to comment, Diego, on what Glenn just said, or?
Yes, I do actually. And I had a question for you, Glenn. So obviously I'm a little more on the beginning stages of my whole Peace Corps experience, having been invited. So I again know Brent and all those RPCVs I really feel for. And I'm just curious, is the Peace Corps application still open? Because I'm thinking about friends of mine that are, coming up into their senior year of college and they're undergraduate and maybe starting to decide, wow, I might want to go serve in the Peace Corps. However, it's right now it's a red light. So what's that looking like for prospective applicants?
Certainly, given the uncertain situation and the conditions, that change even when it comes to COVID, this is hard to predict. But Peace Corps has started transitioning from simply receiving applications and engaging recruiters with applicants to, my understanding is now to start, talking about specific country assignments and departure dates, and then actually inviting to those countries and those departure times for the programs that they have reestablished. Now, again, that we have seen happen before, and the Peace Corps had actually announced that they would field volunteers earlier this year, and they had to retract that because conditions did not allow it. So, I guess I would just say, unfortunately, we're all in a situation where we really don't know, definitively if you're going to get on a plane on a certain date until we really know how COVID stands in a more global perspective, but. Very hopeful, and Peace Corps is working hard to try to provide those opportunities so that you have, some plans that you can tentatively make at least for your future, and hope to be in the Peace Corps on the dates that you have been invited to be there.
So Diego, staying with you, I know I got the opportunity to work with you. I know you are a brilliant young man. I know, for example, you learned Arabic starting at age 17 or 18 and are now fluent in it. You have many opportunities in front of you. The world truly is your oyster. What is it about the Peace Corps that is particularly appealing to you? Why the Peace Corps and why not something else?
That's an absolutely awesome question. And I think just first and foremost, what stands Peace Corps out than a lot of other sort of federal agencies or NGOs or IGOs is just how extremely first and foremost service oriented it is. Growing up, in the community here in northern New Mexico and Santa Fe, and just sort of the values that my own families has instilled in me is just the values of just service and, being a loving neighbor and just being there for other people, and the fact that I am able and have had the opportunities, and through the Peace Corps will still have the opportunity to take those sort of values and those values of service to countries all across the world is probably the light bulb that went off in my head about Peace Corps, and having conversations with you, Sandine, with people across CIR, and even people in other countries, like when I was studying Arabic in the Arabian Gulf area. That's just what really is stuck out to me more so than anything about Peace Corps is just its full commitment to just serving others.
Yeah.
As we say, once a Peace Corps volunteer, always a Peace Corps volunteer. So this is just the beginning of that commitment to service that will manifest itself throughout your life.
Definitely, and that's what I'm and I mean anxious in a great way, just super anxious to get to Morocco just so I can begin to serve again. And I've had the opportunities here in New Mexico throughout the pandemic, which has been great. And that's another thing about Morocco I'm super excited for, is to be able to just be there and serve and speak Arabic every day.
So Greg, that's a great segue to the last question I did ask you, which is from our audience, and Dudley Hafner asks, 86 years in good health, how do I serve in the Peace Corps?
Well, there's sort of three ways one can be involved in Peace Corps. One is to actually volunteer. Again, Peace Corps has a real commitment to supporting older volunteers and recruiting and supporting older volunteers. Now at 86, I mean, there would be a health clearance process, and I don't know how that would how that would work at age 86. But for older people, there is a perception that Peace Corps is a young person's activity. But in fact, Peace Corps has a real commitment to recruit and support older volunteers. The second would be Peace Corps Response. Peace Corps set up a specific program for former volunteers. Initially, it was limited to former volunteers, but then they opened it up to people who have special skills needed by different countries. They tend to be shorter term assignments, 3 to 6 months, sometimes as long as a year. And that's really a great opportunity for former volunteers or people who want to serve who have some really specialized knowledge. And then thirdly, of course, is involvement in the National Peace, in the New Mexico Peace Corps Association, and by extension, the National Peace Corps Association, involved in all the various programs and activities that I outlined that correspond to the third goal of Peace Corps, which is as important as the other two. So those are the 3 ways I would suggest.
So Glenn, we got a question submitted from Susan Sullivan about a week ago to throw to you, and it's a bit of a story of a question, but I'm going to read it now. And she writes, as a 3-time PCV over 50 years in Chile, Liberia, Swaziland, which is of course now renamed Eswatini, and someone interested in going out again on a 1-year assignment, I'd like to express a concern about how current volunteers' connection to home may be a threat to the future of Peace Corps. I would add to the discussion that when I was in Swaziland in 2009 and 10, I was disappointed to see that younger volunteers were online with home and friends and then gathering together in the capital city on weekends. They weren't fully into their community nor relying on that community for their social life. Physical gatherings are less likely in larger countries, but internet contact with home and among volunteers is probably a distraction from depending on the site for social and emotional support. So the question, is internet connectivity a problem for the future of the Peace Corps? And given the fact that we live in this dizzying connected world, really no matter where we are in the world, how can we ensure a fuller integration of PCVs into host communities?
Yeah, this is a really great question, and I'm actually glad to answer it in not what is a right or wrong way, but just from my perspective. One is, I will say, we have a saying in the Peace Corps, your service is your service. And that really means what you make of it, you will get out of it, what you put into it and what you want to get out of it. And so you make choices in terms of how you experience your 2 years in the Peace Corps. If you decide to stay close to other volunteers and maybe lesser contact with your community, you'll probably have a different experience than many of us who stay in our sites every week and all the time and immerse ourselves and in our communities and the culture. But what I would say is, when it comes to internet, internet has actually, while it may have enhanced the connectivity of volunteers with their family and friends back home, which in my case, I was able to call my parents maybe once a month after going through a long kind of process of waiting in a line and getting a phone cabinet to call from. But with internet these days and Facebook and social media and email and everything, we can think of it as a way of enhancing our impact on the third goal, even before we've returned home, because we're sharing our experience and we're sharing the impressions and we're sharing the cultures and languages that we're experiencing as a part of our service with family and friends back home in that process. So I think, to the response of Susan there, I would say each individual's experience is unique unto themselves and what they make of it. And it might be that they're using that time on internet to communicate back home about their experiences, and that may really have a positive impact in terms of our helping create a better understanding of other countries and cultures on the part of Americans. I know in my case, it certainly would have, sharing my stories back home with my family and friends about my experience certainly would have had that impact. My parents and my brother did have the opportunity to come visit me during my service, and it had a profound impact on them just from a short visit. So I think internet and communication back home with our communities at home can actually be a positive if it's done in the right way.
Well, and in terms of the gathering part of that question, as somebody who spent much of my 20s with a backpack on my shoulders, I met Peace Corps volunteers all over South America and Africa. especially in Lesotho, I got to know quite a number of Peace Corps volunteers, and they would gather together as a group in the capital city about once a month. And it was just a spectacular way for them to just reconnect with their peers and have conversations in full flowing slang riddled English. And I think it was just an incredibly important way for them to kind of recharge their batteries a little bit before going out into sites that could have been, well, that were difficult, that had trying circumstances written all over them. So folks, we are heading into the Q&A period. I'd love to see some more questions. I'm going to take one right now from George and D. Gamble, and I'm going to leave this open, panelists. Whoever would like to jump in on this, please do. And they write, regarding the future of the Peace Corps, one big question is, can the Peace Corps be part of a broader national service and part of a required service, an alternative to military service, or just a broader national effort to recruit volunteers? Who'd like to jump in on that one?
Well, I'll start off. That certainly has always been the hope from the very beginning of Peace Corps. Sergeant Shriver, who was the first director of Peace Corps, had this expansive vision for the role of Peace Corps as an alternative to the military. So the Army Corps and the Peace Corps, right? But it's never been fully realized. There were creation of like AmeriCorps. There have been creation of sister organizations that provide volunteer opportunities domestically, and they have expanded over the years as well. But both Peace Corps and AmeriCorps and related organizations have pretty well flattened out over the last 20 years. And what the plans are from going forward, I'm not entirely clear. I'll leave it to Glenn, who probably has a more insider view of that.
Well, I changed my background there to reflect a bumper sticker that we've handed out before. It says, "I served my country as a Peace Corps volunteer." And, we introduced ourselves on the Hill to members of Congress. Glenn Blumhorst, I served my country as a Peace Corps volunteer in Guatemala. And, really reinforcing that idea that Peace Corps is national service is important. I came from a family of national service. My father was a Marine, my brother was in the Army, my uncle served in Vietnam. I served in the Peace Corps, and I believe, that we can instill that idea that Peace Corps is national service. And in fact, we are part of an alliance. National Peace Corps Association is a member of the Service Year Alliance, which includes AmeriCorps and others that promote national service, whether in the private sector or public sector. And our intention is to create a national norm of service for at least 1 million individuals a year serving in their country in any way, in their country or abroad, in a volunteer capacity. And that includes military as well. So we believe that national service is in fact the solution to many of the issues that we deal with as society and as a country. And really, if more individuals were inclined to serve our country in any way that they could, we believe it would open things for greater dialogue and cross issue understanding and many of the divides that we have in our country right now.
Can you imagine how incredible this country would be if everybody had to go abroad for at least a year of service? The eyes that would be open, the ways we would understand how incredibly connected we are. Whew, one can dream, but seeing more and more PCVs head out there, I think it just has so many net benefits for the United States itself, and of course for the world beyond. So let's talk about the world beyond for a second. Peace Corps volunteers are typically, serve a particular thematic or a particular, they look at agriculture issues or they look at education issues. The world is changing really quickly, and obviously we've already talked about coronavirus and its change on the world. The other major element out there is climate change and how that is radically reshaping human society, particularly in more tropical countries that may be experiencing more shocks to the system. And maybe Glenn, I'll pitch this back at you. Is the Peace Corps looking at what types of activities PCVs do abroad and how to adjust, change, or add to those activities to reflect the many, many changes in the world today?
Yes, certainly it would be expected, and we are strongly advocating to Peace Corps leadership and Congress that Peace Corps volunteers be engaged in global health issues, climate change, and where their work on the ground can really have a positive impact. And ultimately, in many of these cases, climate change, for example, is one of the root causes of immigration, particularly from where I served in Central America. And really, volunteers can address many of those issues with their work that they're doing on the ground with their counterparts in agriculture and environment and small business. And really seeing them on the front lines, if you will, of these issues is going to be, I think, the future of the Peace Corps. We strongly encourage that. We expect the next Peace Corps leadership, the next director, to roll out a vision toward that end, and that the programming and the retooling that we've talked about that's going to be necessary in the Peace Corps will reflect more work on the ground in those areas. We've already heard a couple of countries re-emerging with programs that are addressing climate change, and volunteers have for many years worked on programs that in other ways address climate change and global health issues. So again, building on that and enhancing it for the future, I think is the direction we'll see.
And if I could follow up on that, Sandy, I participated last year in a focus group that the National Peace Corps Association organized to address this very question. So it was a focus group organized of returned Peace Corps volunteers to assess their views of how Peace Corps should be engaged in these global, or how its priorities should shift to be engaged in these global issues. And the word from the focus group was very clearly that Peace Corps should, in addition to its traditional programs, begin to emphasize responses to these global issues of climate change, of global health, and migration, the three big ones that came out. So that's going to be an ongoing discussion, how to balance, because the core of Peace Corps is really to engage with the community, and then out of that engagement, grow a set or build a consensus around a set of community development objectives. And so there's a hesitation to come in with a lot of preconceived notions, like here's the program and here's what we're selling. That's kind of the wrong message. So finding the right balance between an acknowledgement of these overarching global challenges and that commitment to a kind of community-based community development model will be a challenge for Peace Corps going forward, but it's an important one.
Mm-hmm. So Diego, over to you. I know you spoke a little bit about your intended or hoped for assignment in Morocco. Can you tell us a little bit more about the exact sort of activities and sector that you'd like to work in?
Yes, so I was actually placed into the youth and development sector, and if I recall correctly, that's the only sector that is serving in Morocco. So that is the main sort of thematic and concentration going on with the Peace Corps in Morocco. So how it stands in terms of activities or anything like that, I'm not entirely too sure, because I, of course, haven't been to staging yet and through the training. But from what I have talked about with my Peace Corps recruiter and with others within my cohort, and those who are in charge of the Peace Corps within Morocco, of course, it'll be stuff like teaching English as well. But I know getting involved with the community in terms of, maybe developing youth programs and youth groups, running summer camps, anything along those lines. And speaking in terms of climate change, I'm sure just educating the community as well, and youth in Morocco as well, on the effects of climate change within Morocco and within the country, and how to, mitigate that on a personal, individual level, which could be, as simple as, throwing away your garbage and, along those lines, and stuff that a lot of people, even within New Mexico, would and should learn, at least in my own community that I've seen.
Glenn, walk us a little bit into the politics behind this all. We, for example, I would love to know what happened to congressional allocations to the Peace Corps that didn't get spent, and does that affect the future of the Peace Corps budget, and sort of where does the Peace Corps sit in, you know, this radically divided Congress that we have, and you help us understand a little bit of that back end to the Peace Corps.
Certainly. Well, for starters, Peace Corps budget, I might have mentioned this, at $410 million has been flat for the last 6 years. So the buying power of that money has decreased over that time, and it's becoming a critical issue for the Peace Corps. That budget of $410 million represents 1%, less than 1% of the international affairs budget, which is less than 1% of the US federal budget. So if you really think about it, it is a drop in the bucket in terms of our federal appropriations. And combined with the situation of the flat funding for the last 6 years, which has precluded Peace Corps from implementing many of the things that needed to be implemented in terms of continued improvements to the Peace Corps, programming improvements, and then also opening new programs or expanding programs. Peace Corps has essentially been constrained by this over the last few years. Now, the evacuation itself cost roughly $88 million, which we were able to get supplemental funding approved by Congress for that. Peace Corps generally spends its budget and is restricted only by the cap on the budget. That remains to be seen. I think, you know, how things work out for FY 2021 and then into 2022. But it is certainly critical that at this point Peace Corps receive, you know, some kind of increase, and so we're looking at the possibility of a $20 million increase for FY 22, which has been now approved by the House of Representatives for a new budget of $430 million. And we're confident that the Senate will also approve a budget of that level for Peace Corps as well. But this upward trend needs to continue, because I think there's a bit of a misperception there that with no volunteers in the field, Peace Corps must be saving a lot of money, and that's not the case. The volunteers themselves actually represent a smaller portion of the overall budget than you might expect. It's the infrastructure and the staffing and the programming that really are the majority of the budget. And volunteers work as volunteers basically, and they do receive a small allowance and a readjustment allowance. But Peace Corps has found itself in a tight situation with its budget over the last few years because of the flat funding. Increasing it is very important. And if there are, if there's any underspending, of course, Peace Corps operates on a 2-year budget that can sometimes be passed over to the next year as well.
And just for my edification, Peace Corps sits under or within the ambit of the State Department, or is it separate?
No, Peace Corps is an independent agency, reports directly to the president, and we want to keep it that way. Folding it into the State Department or USCID, we believe would compromise the independence of the agency and the security and safety of volunteers and alignment with any U.S. foreign policy. So it's very important that we keep it a separate entity. There has been legislation introduced by Senator Scott last year to realign Peace Corps under State Department, and we of course oppose that. I don't think that's been reintroduced this year yet, though.
Okay. So look, yep, go ahead.
I was just going to follow up. There were a number of reforms and suggestions in the 2020 appropriation bill for Peace Corps. Where do those stand in their implementation, given the fact that they were authorized in 2020?
Yeah, and you might be referring to the Samfar Nick Castle Act, which was passed in 2020. And again, I think the question has been more than anything on where do we stand on implementation of any of those reforms. And part of the Garamendi legislation that we've been working on in the House does include reestablishing an advisory council that would be responsible for monitoring and evaluating implementation of a broad array of reforms and improvements necessary at the Peace Corps, because I think the accountability is a key question, and ensuring that there's follow through on implementation of those recommendations is important. It's not always easy to get that information from the Peace Corps. We do work to try to get updates. I think the current director has been much more proactive, and I should say the acting director, Carol Spahn, has been much more proactive in messaging out many of the things that they're working on and following through on that legislation and other things that aren't necessarily legislated.
Mhm.
So let's talk about immediate future steps for the future of the Peace Corps. I see a question here from Susan Selvin again. Is the virtual Peace Corps Connect conference still happening September 23rd to 25th?
Yes, it is. Thanks for the question. And we have an annual conference. It's called Peace Corps Connect. Usually it's a in-person gathering, and on the 60th anniversary of the Peace Corps, we would normally be commemorating 60 years and gathering here in Washington, D.C. for a big event. And unfortunately, that's not happening. So it's going to be remote this year, which I think will enable many more people probably to be a part of it than if we were to have a physical event. So that is still on for September 23, 25. We will be announcing that. I think there's a newsletter awaiting my approval right now that will go out that announces the registration has opened for Peace Corps Connect 23, 25. I will just say, if you're interested in advocacy, it looks like we're going to also have on the 22nd some sessions on advocacy for those who are interested in learning more about our advocacy efforts. That's traditionally would have been our advocacy day. It's, if you will, Peace Corps Act Day. That's the day President Kennedy signed the Peace Corps Act on September 22nd at, I believe, 9:45 a.m. So we're going to work a little bit on advocacy that day, but the conference itself starts on the 23rd on Eastern time in the evenings, so that those on the West Coast can join us in the late afternoon through Saturday afternoon.
Let me
And
follow up on that, Sandy. Let me follow up quickly on that, Sandy. The New Mexico Peace Corps Association has supported the lobbying efforts of the National Peace Corps Association consistently over the years. But what we really need, and what the National Peace Corps Association promotes, is a legislative liaison person, a person who really takes that responsibility on. So let me give a pitch out there for any RPCVs listening. We need somebody to fill that role who will take on that consistent communication with our congressional delegation. Fortunately, in New Mexico, we have a very supportive congressional delegation of Peace Corps, but it's important to keep that liaison going. So if there's anybody out there who wants to play that role on behalf of the New Mexico Peace Corps Association and RPCVs generally, let me know.
Can I just clarify, Greg? I'd say it doesn't have to be an RPCV. We've had some great advocacy coordinators who have been invitees or aspirants. So not to say Diego needs to be thinking of that, but anyone who really can advocate and share the message about the Peace Corps can serve in that capacity.
Good point. Thanks.
Terrific. And Diego, we started with you, and I think we should end with you. So your future is really waiting by the telephone or by your email inbox. And, you know, does that give you anxiety? And you know, do you have a moment where you ultimately say, well, this isn't happening and I need to, you know, I need to live my life and all of that. Tell us where you are in terms of your immediate future.
Immediate future, that's a very great question. I'm asking myself that question, Sandy. Been asking myself that one for a few months now. I think where it stands right now, I have a lot of hope and I have a lot of gratitude, and I'm gonna hold out for it as long as I possibly can. I don't know what that time frame will be, but that is currently what I am beginning to consider and pray about now, and we will see how that goes. So for right now, I am just here in Santa Fe, just looking to serve my community in any way I possibly can. And again, thank you for letting me, you know, speak with you and meet you all and be able to tell my little story with the Peace Corps. But for it stands right now, I'm still holding out for it. I know this is what I want to do and want to serve the Peace Corps.
I could ask a follow-up question, Sandy. How, in your discussions among your peers, among people who are in your condition, you're in your situation, what's your sense of how many people are holding out, how many people are giving up, how many people are moving on? Do you have a sense of that?
I have a bit of a sense of it. So when I was invited to join, you know, Peace Corps in Morocco, we were able to get connected with our cohort, and we actually had our own like WhatsApp group and group meeting. We would text back and forth about how excited we were and questions that we had and all that. And then of course the pandemic hit. And I do know quite a bit of people who were invited to be in Morocco with me, decided, I can't put this off forever. So they've decided to go to graduate school or kind of move on. But again, it comes down to an individual basis. As far as I know, people holding out, again, this is a pretty large cohort from Morocco, I believe around 120, 130 Peace Corps volunteers. I haven't heard of anyone else holding out. But again, that's only the few people that I have been in contact with out of the 130, a dozen or so that I've been in constant contact with. So I would hope that people are holding out like I am, but we'll see.
That's an interesting insight. And it's certainly understandable why people would make that choice. But it also suggests the importance of intensified recruitment for Peace Corps. We've got to fill the line. We've got to refill the applicant pool to get Peace Corps back in business. We can't really rely upon people who were evacuated because, like you, they're, as you say, many of them have just decided they've got to move on.
Right. Exactly.
And I wish we had I'd thought about including the Peace Corps recruiter in this discussion. That would have been a good insight into what they're doing.
Is her name Maria Goodfellow?
But I understand Maria Goodfellow is moving on. So
okay.
I need to confirm that, but I heard that through a reliable source that she's moving on. So I don't know what those plans are.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time. Diego, boy, I wish you the best for the future and hang in there.
Thank
and
you so much, Sandy.
I just have this sneaky feeling knowing you that it's all going to work out extremely well. And Glenn Blumhorst, thank you so much for taking the time to share your unique insights with us today. Super appreciated.
Pleasure.
And Greg, as always, thank you so much. And certainly I hope folks out there who want to be involved in the New Mexico Peace Corps or our RPCV community will reach out to you, and we can keep building this really important movement here at home. So thanks to you, Greg.
Thank you, Sandy. Thanks for including.
And then I guess for everyone else out there, thank you so much for joining us for another fantastic experience. It's been my unique pleasure to serve as your moderator and host for these many, many streams over this last little while. I hope you'll stay as engaged with CIR as always, and stay tuned for all kinds of upcoming events. And certainly our next one is in a couple of weeks on August 26th, when we get into State of the State Department. And I have a sneaky feeling too that we'll be covering a lot of similar issues to the ones that we've talked about today. So until then, everyone stay well and safe and healthy out there. And we will see you all very soon.